tech. That's why we are here today. So I'm so delighted and excited to be having us. And today we'll be starting. Um, we have several topics lined up um, for this series of events, and today we'll be starting off with starting a career in tech in software engineering. Yes, software engineering, and we have our speaker right here in our midst, all the way from Europe. Stephen Udepo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Collins. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, so let's go straight into our session for today. I will just I'd like to say you can tell us your name, tell us what you do presently and where you work, if that's fine with you. So we start from there.
Okay. Good evening. It's nice to be here, and thank you, Collins, for the opportunity to speak here. And I hope that I'll be able to give some valuable insights and help someone in their journey and their career. So, my name is Stephen Odoipo. Graduated from Obafemi Awolowo University, studied microbiology. Um, I live in Portugal now. I work for a firm in Portugal as a software engineer. And I've been doing software for 5 years now. And it has been a beautiful journey for me. It has proven to be what I expected it to be when I chose to start this journey those many years ago. And I'm happy to be where I am now. And I'm also happy to help people also climb up the ladder as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm sure some of you are surprised. Studied at Obafemi Awolowo University and is presently far away, thousands of miles away in Portugal there. So the next question I'll be having for you is, how did you begin your career in software engineering? How did you begin? And you want to also tie that to what motivated you to pursue this career, knowing that you said you studied microbiology at Obafemi Awolowo University.
Yes, I did. Yeah. It's an interesting story. I've told this story a few times before. And I just had this conviction, right? That growing up, I mean, typically, if you were like me, growing up in those days when phones were not so common, I was always playing my dad's phone, playing my mom's phone, and they were always complaining, Steven, drop the phone, you will spoil your eye. Well, they were a bit right because now I use glasses, so listen to your parents. But I've always been a computer guy, right? I had a computer at some point when I was a teenager, and I just like to explore everything. I like to use it to the fullest. I used to criticize people a lot who had phones and they're just basically using it for Facebook and all. And I'm like, there's so much more you can do with this device. Why do you keep doing only this other small aspect of the device here? So that was the kind of person I was. So having graduated from the university, or at least while I was in university, I really believed in microbiology because I had a huge focus on food microbiology, and I was hoping to work in the manufacturing industry, which is an industry that I'm still fascinated by till today. And I hope to do something in that space in the coming future. And so when I graduated, I wanted to do something in food microbiology. So I invested myself. After I did NYC, I worked in a few manufacturing companies. Um, the conviction was not so good because it took me down a very dangerous path that would have led to a different outcome today. I remember in 2018, I was working at a factory as a production manager for a food manufacturing company at the time. And it wasn't the best experience ever because it was a lot of stress and a very, very small amount of money. And so at the time I was living in my apartment, and I remember going back home for the weekend to go see my mom. And when I went to see her, I just remember lying down on my bed, where I mean in the family house. And I lied down on my bed and I was thinking to myself that, see, if you continue this thing you're playing, yeah, this game you're playing, you will push yourself down the wrong path for a very long time, right? Because at the time, earning a salary of 300K was really, really big. I wasn't earning 300K, but I was hoping to earn 300K. And the projection to earn 300K with the career path I was on would have taken me 10 years. So I won't be earning 300K if I'd followed that path now. I'll be earning 300K in 2027. And then I looked at it like, am I going to wait 10 years to earn only 300K? What kind of this thing is not going to work? Because then I was earning very low. I was earning 25,000, doing a lot of work like a crazy person, right? So I told myself that if I don't switch, if I don't become a computer person, I remember saying something like that. In 10 years' time, I'm going to regret it. Because I was thinking about that 10-year plan, the 10-year projection thing. And if I don't switch now, I'm going to regret it in 10 years' time. Because I also knew that every year that comes by, tech will play a huge role in our lives, much more than it did in the previous year. For example, 2022, no one was talking about ChatGPT and AI assistants as much as they are now. Now it has become so pervasive that it feels so normal. Everybody, if you have a question, you go ask ChatGPT or Google Bard or Twitter or all the other options that are available. And so tech has taken another chunk in our what would have been our daily life, much more than it did the year before. That's 2022. And 2024, I won't be surprised. Tech continues to encroach into what would have been our normal lives, right? And so having a skill in this industry that will continue to grow, right? We don't know in what direction it will grow. We don't know in what direction, in what, we don't know how much it will affect our lives, but we know that for sure 10 years from now, tech will have a much bigger impact on our lives than it is doing today. And our lives are currently heavily teched out right now. And in 10 years' time, they'll be much more teched out than they are now, or than we are now. And so I made that decision in 2018. And I started learning software engineering online. I started with Python. I was learning Python online, partly because in the university I did a course with Fortran that was supposed to introduce us to computer software engineering, but ended up chasing most people away from computer software engineering, right? And so I started with Python in 2018. And then I remember towards the end of 2018, Andela had a cohort, right? And in that cohort, they divided into two, where Nigerians, they would sponsor Nigerians who were, the Nigerian cohort was going to be focused on JavaScript, and the Kenyan cohort was going to be focused on Python. And I was learning Python at the time. I was relatively okay. I wasn't so bad. I wasn't anywhere near good either, but at least I knew the basic concepts of Python at the time. And so I looked at it as, oh, if I'm going to be able to take advantage of this, I have to switch to JavaScript. And so at the end of 2018, I started learning JavaScript and switched to JavaScript so that I could join the Andela cohort. However, I made that switch too late, and so I couldn't join. And so since I missed that out, I just went all in on JavaScript. And one of the things I liked about JavaScript over Python was that during JavaScript, you had a visual interface to interact with, right? Because you mostly be dealing with HTML and CSS. And because of the visual interface, it made me enjoy it much more than I did when I was doing Python, when everything was a bit more abstract. And so I went all in. Mind you, all of this learning and software, blah, 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 I was doing was just on my phone. I didn't have a laptop at the time, as recently as 20.
Interesting.
And I was doing all of this on my phone. And then I quit the job I was doing, came back home, stayed home fully. And for the next 5 months, I locked myself in my room at home, and I just kept learning. I kept learning. I had no friends at the time. I wasn't talking to anybody. I wasn't going out to meet anybody. No one was coming to visit me. I just focused fully on learning. And then after that, I got my first job, and we're here now. So that's basically how it started. That's kind of like a streamlined version of the story.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much for sharing. I feel that there's a lot you shared there, and there's a lot of value that anyone who wants to actually either pivot or start a career will definitely be learning and gleaning from there. Um, so of course it might appear challenging, but you you made a decision to looking at where you are and where you want to be. So will this job be able to cater for me? Will this job be able to provide the basic needs that I have? Are you able to decide
Yeah.
that, oh, let me make that decision? So I feel that's something that many people do not actually look into. Many people just jump into a career path and just expect that something will come out of it. But sometimes you just necessarily you just have to look deeper and find out this part I found myself. Is there was a prospect? Can you actually point to several persons that you know who are on that path that you are in presently and have actually
Mhm.
gotten to a point where you say, oh, you like to be at that point within the shortest possible time. So that's the reason why we're talking tech. Because
Yeah.
I tell many young people that if you pick up a tech skill and you own it, you are diligent for the next 5 years, you'll be earning you by the end of your fifth year, you'll be earning way more than most other career paths, right? And
Yeah.
it's something that many young people will really need to hear about. So you already jumped into my next question that I wanted to ask. So I wanted to ask about what are technical skills that are essential. I know you already mentioned Python, you mentioned JavaScript, and a few other tools like that. So what are essential skills, that's technical skills this time around, that are essential for someone who wants to work as a software engineer?
Well, data analysis is a big one. I know a lot of people who try to learn data analysis, but they fail to continue. However, if you successfully make it as a
Software
data analyst,
engineering, you wanted to say.
data, I'm talking about coding generally.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So data analysis with Python or R, um, software engineering with maybe front-end engineering with JavaScript. I'm not going to go into frameworks because frameworks are secondary. Python, learning Python, a programming language, JavaScript, very important. Node.js, which JavaScript for the front end and the back end. Learning Laravel Python is very, very, very important. I'm sorry, Laravel PHP, very, very important. Um, I can't really say, but Dart showed some progress. But I won't say you should invest too much in that. But I'd say learn for the front end on the web, learn JavaScript. For mobile, learn maybe Swift or Kotlin or Java. For server-side applications, learn Node.js, learn Laravel, also learn Java as well. Because I think that these sectors will continue to grow in the nearest future, especially in Nigeria. And the reason why I started with data analysis is because in Nigeria, the tech scene is growing, right? And because they're growing, they're beginning to accumulate data. And because they're accumulating data, they will start needing people who are data analysts to handle that data that they've accumulated over the years. And the more data they have, the more they need data analysts, right? So that's something I think will be big because people are accumulating data massively and they need to do something with it. They're not just going to have data in silos and they don't do anything with it. That would be waste of all of that information. So those are key areas I think that anyone should invest themselves in. And tech is really good because it has a really relatively short turnaround time from when you are nobody to when you can become somebody compared to most fields. For example, if it's medicine, it will take you much longer to get into medicine and then to become somebody in medicine. So that's one of the best things about tech.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thanks for. I hope everyone online is taking notes of the tools they mentioned. Tools they mentioned. So just for a bit of clarity, yeah, sometimes we hear stuff like I'm a full stack developer, I'm a front end, I'm back end. Can you expatiate? What do they really mean? And what are the limitations for these skills?
Okay, yeah. So what a front-end engineer basically is a front-end engineer is somebody who does with the visual interface of software. So any part of the software you can see and interact with, that's what the front-end engineer is doing. For example, Zoom, we're all using. The front-end engineer is the one who is responsible for building the interface that we are interacting with. You can see the mute button, you can see participants, share screen, record, and all of those features that are view that you can interact with visually, and typically usually is on the device that the user is using, right? So the front-end engineer is usually the person who is working with the software that will be domiciled on the end user's device. Could be his laptop, tablet, phone, whatever device they're using, right? A backend engineer usually is the person who will build software that is domiciled on the server and has to do with all the server-side activities, such as, for example, to set up this call with Zoom, a server is required to ensure that there's connection between myself and everyone here, and the same vice versa, right? So that's the job of the backend engineer. A full stack engineer, however, has to do both. Has to be efficient with or proficient with doing things on the back end, like server side, and then doing things on the front end, like device side or what we call client side. So that's what those things are. Mobile developers, however, usually are those who focus on building mobile apps that you will find on the App Store or Play Store. So they're a bit different, even though you could typically make the argument that a mobile developer is also a front-end engineer, because front end is not necessarily domiciled, doesn't have to be on the browser, it doesn't have to be on Chrome. It can also be on App Store as well. So we're just referring, when we say front end, we're referring to the front end of the software that people can see and interact with.
All right. All right, thanks. Thank you so much for bringing clarity. So front end, back end, full stack. So I can actually decide to be a front end engineer or a back end
Yeah.
engineer or be a full stack, right?
Yes, yes. But I usually advise that you should pick one struggle first before you can go full stack. Because if you try to go full stack too early, you are trying to force too much information down into your brain within a very short time, which most people can't do, right? But if you start with front end, for example, you start with back end, you can grow from back end to front end and become full stack, or from front end to back end and become full stack.
All right. So pick one, pick your battle and face it. Don't go all
Yeah,
out for everything. Decide
yeah,
either you want to go for front end and own it or go to back end or learn back end and own
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, so as touching learning, for someone who wants to start out, someone who has no idea of software engineering, what is software is, where do you think that person can actually start from? In terms of what platform can they go, what materials would you do you recommend, or how do you think what's the best way for them to learn? Should they go to a software engineering school or should they self-learn? What do you think, which method do you think is the best to learn software engineering?
Okay, so I'll start from the beginning. I had a conversation about this recently with someone, and he was telling me something about how much more difficult it would have been to become a software engineer if we didn't have basic software, or rather basic computer literacy in the beginning. So if you didn't know how to operate a phone, an Android phone or an iPhone many years ago, or you don't know how to work with a computer so many years before now, it would be such a huge jump for you to learn software engineering, right? If this is your first interaction with a computer, you have a lot of mental hurdles to cross before you could become a software engineer. However, if that's not the case for you, and you already have basics computer literacy, which is very important, because you shouldn't be learning, at least I will not advise it, you shouldn't be learning for loops when you don't know how to control C and control V, for example. If interaction with the keyboard is a mental struggle for you, then all of those things are further down the line, and you should first clear out the basics of computer literacy first. be comfortable with the computer, and then before you can consider becoming a software engineer, right? But if you don't have that problem, the easiest way or the best way for me, I recommend, for example, I started with YouTube. I think YouTube is one of the best resources you can find for learning, because typically people who are just migrating to becoming software engineers usually do not have so much money. They're not the richest people, and so they may not be able to afford to pay for courses, right? So I'll typically advise you to start with YouTube, look for some tutorials. I tell you to try out Free Code Camp, especially on YouTube. You can just browse through Free Code Camp page, and then whatever speaks to you, if it's front end that speaks to you there, you fire down. If it's AI that speaks to you there, you fire down. Just take it and then just follow, because they have a lot of courses on YouTube that you can start with. And then if you go through that part, and they're really, really intense courses, they have courses that are like 30 hours long. So there are hardly any courses out there that you will pay for that will give you as much value or even more better value than what you can get from Free Code Camp's YouTube page, which is very, very important. But then if that's not your thing, I advise you to check out Coursera and edX, because Coursera and edX, they partner with universities in Europe and America and in Asia as well. The best universities to craft courses that will do two things for you. So if you go to YouTube, for example, and you take a course, you know it. Let's assume that you learned it very well and you're quite good at it, yeah? You now have to prove that you know it to get hired. But if you go to Coursera or edX to take a course, even before you have to prove that you know it, you have a certificate that says that you know something about this thing that you are claiming you know. So it helps you put your toe at least through the door. And then you now have to prove yourself after that, versus with YouTube where you just have to prove yourself. There's no proof that you knew this thing before now. Another good resource is Udemy. Udemy is relatively cheap. I think it's the cheapest. You can find courses on Udemy for as low as 3,000 naira or 5,000, depending, because they usually have promos. So if you check Udemy today and that course is going for 30K, just wait a week or 2 weeks, you will find it to do promo. They do promos like every 2 weeks, something like that. And they'll slash it down to like 8,000 or so, depending on what type of course it is. So these four resources I think will be the best. Start with YouTube. You can use Coursera and edX so that they give you the credibility of a certificate, of a certification. And then you can also check out Udemy. Udemy certificates are good, but to me, they don't hold as much weight as a Coursera certificate does, because Udemy is taught by someone like me, for example. You may not really know me. People don't really know who the instructors are on Udemy, right? Some of them have good reputations, but they are not authorities. Versus if you go to Coursera and then you take a course and the course was taught by MIT, for example, or Harvard or Stanford, that does gives you a lot of credibility, or Michigan University. It gives you a lot of credibility that you and I also noticed that if you take a course from Coursera, generally, because the lecturers are usually veterans in the field, they will teach you core principles of software engineering, and they will not focus too much on the programming language, right? They will teach you things about programming that you can take, whether you're learning Python today or learning Java tomorrow or PHP next tomorrow or JavaScript. It wouldn't matter, because what they taught you there would prepare your mind for every other programming language, right? So that's why I advise people to take from Coursera and Co. So like I said, YouTube, Coursera, edX, and Udemy. They're very good resources.
Thank you
If
so
you're on
much.
YouTube,
Thank you.
get
Thank you.
check out Free Camp on YouTube.
Yes, yes, yes. I personally believe that a lot of people downplay YouTube a lot. I still spoke with someone today and he wanted to start out wanted to get a course and I pay for a course. I told him that there are tons of resources that are available for free on YouTube that you can actually
Yeah,
start with even before getting a course. And I told him that the
yeah,
reason why I would advise that is because when you are starting out in any career path, you do not know what to expect. As such, if you go and pay
exactly.
for a course, you don't know the value of that course. But if you start out with YouTube, own your skills, then you can tell after learning the skill, you can tell after a period of time, oh, this is what I want next, this is what I want next. So you will be able to know what kind of course to go for, what kind of course to pay for, and not just pay for any course just because you actually want to
Yeah.
pick up a skill in that particular part. So it's so I mean, there are a lot of resources on YouTube that people just bypass, and a lot of people, interestingly, a lot of people just go on YouTube and just watch the funny content and just move on. But there are a lot of resources that can actually help you kickstart your journey in software engineering, just like um, Stephen just mentioned. So you could explore this, you could explore YouTube as well as every other platform he has mentioned tonight, and I'm sure that you will definitely be on your feet and find your fit in software, starting a career in software engineering. So my next question is, can you help us? Can you run us through your typical day as a software engineer, where you work presently? What does your typical day look like?
Okay. So basically, usually I start the day with a meeting where we do a rundown of what I've been working on, and then everybody on the team says, okay, this is what we usually call it a stand-up,
Yeah, stand up.
and
Typically.
talk about what you're working on, blah blah blah, and then and what you should be working on, because we typically be looking at the Jira board and looking at the task on the board, and then you pick up a task there and then you start. So typically when you pick up a task, you try to read the task. What is this task talking about? A well-written task will define the problem in a very clear manner, well written with pictures as well, to help you, because if you don't have a full understanding of what you're trying to do, it's really hard to solve the problem, right? Because I work in a large organization, it's not the same as when I was working at a startup. We are building entirely new things from scratch, so the flow is a bit different, because in a large organization, you're mostly doing bug fixes or adding small new features. In small organizations, you're building everything from scratch, and features are usually huge, right? But we try to split it into 2 week sprints. And then in some cases, especially in if you're working in a company that's in Europe, for example, where the work schedule is not as strenuous as what it is like in Nigeria, you have the opportunity to, okay, pick a task, spend some time, which is the best flow for me, if you ask me. Pick a task, spend some time ensuring that you understand that task very well. If it is something in a field that you do not know very well, take your some time, take a course. I have a monthly subscription with Coursera, for example. Every month I pay, so that whatever I need to learn, I just go to Coursera, watch a few videos, grab that skill. Typically, at the end of watching the video or the set of videos, I get a certificate at the end, which is nice. I add that to my LinkedIn, which makes me more valuable in the eyes of potential recruiters in future. And then once you watch the video, to ensure that you learn that thing, and so you can apply that new knowledge to solve the problem. And I advise this approach a lot, because if you try to solve problem with the knowledge you already have, which is probably limited, you will waste a lot of time, you make a lot of mistakes, and you're not as creative, you won't be so creative, because creativity is a product of accumulation of knowledge. ChatGPT can appear so creative because ChatGPT has read every book and every website that's online. And so because they accumulated so much information, ChatGPT can randomly pick from any source and combine it in what we will call creative ways. So to be more creative, I advise you to take some time out, read a book, read a textbook, watch some videos, register for a course, so that you can you can employ very creative solutions to solve that problem. So that's
All
it.
right. So I have a few more questions before our time um, goes out. So I want to ask, you are presently working in Europe. So how did you migrate? How did you get a job? How was the journey like for you moving from Nigeria to Europe?
I said take LinkedIn very seriously. I was really lucky. A few of us who got the job to were really lucky, because there's some recruiters in Europe who were looking for people, and I think they're looking for developers in Nigeria, mostly because developers in Nigeria begin to have a very good international reputation. Developers from Brazil, Nigeria, India, they have a very good international reputation, and they are considered also cheap. So they are cheap and they are good, or at least good to a certain level, versus the developer from the US or the UK, who would probably be good, as good or not so much better, but will cost way more than it will cost to get someone from Brazil, Nigeria, and India. And so the recruiters were just checking on LinkedIn, and then they saw my profile, and then they sent me a message on LinkedIn, and like, I like your profile. If you're available, we could schedule, and then that's how it started. It was September last year. That was when I first contacted the recruiter, and then I resumed in December 2022. And as part of the job, I also got a relocation part as part of the offer. And so when I got the job, they arranged for my visa and paid my flights for me to move to Europe. So that's how, so that's how tech can change your life typically.
I mean, so interesting story. I don't know. Did you see this about if someone had told you that you'll be living in Europe some 2, 3 years ago, would you have believed it?
I wouldn't have, I would have projected it for maybe 5 or 6 years from that time.
Wow,
I
wow.
wouldn't have expected it to come as early as it did.
I mean, that's the power of tech and how it's been changing lives for so many people from here in Nigeria. So I'd like to know, so what do you think anybody coming into software engineering should pay attention to, especially a newbie, someone who has no background, who probably has no connection out there, but just eager and willing to learn about software. What advice will you be giving to that person?
I'd say always bear in mind that education is a lifelong journey. You will never stop learning. I hate the fact sometimes, right? Because I feel like I've invested so much in myself, and there should be a point when I can be able to just relax and coast. But you will never get the opportunity in tech. You always have to continue to learn because there's always something new, and there are always new people. So the competition is always stiff because you're competing with yourself of yesterday, and you're competing with new people who are coming to to bring new solutions to existing problems or solving problems we did not even know that existed, right? For example, last year we weren't competing with ChatGPT. Now every software developer is kind of competing with ChatGPT. For now, it is helping software developers get better, right? But in future, it will not be too far away from now when AI could practically do everything that the software engineer is doing today. For example, to me, I think about the software engineer as a factory worker, right? 50, 60, 80 years ago, factory workers were very highly skilled engineers. They were working in manufacturing plants, maybe where they manufacture cars and stuff like that. But a lot of those processes have been at least 80% replaced by robots, right? And AI will be the robot that will replace a lot of engineers. And you have to continue to learn to ensure that you have something that makes you special. And so continue to chase being special because um, at some point, not everyone will be able to be a software engineer, and you have to find something that will make you special, to make you valuable in the market. Because what you are doing is selling skill for money, right? Someone's paying us for what we can bring to the table. And if they can find a place to get what we bring to the table cheaper, they'll go for it. What makes you special? Why should they keep paying you? So you have to continue to chase that because life doesn't really care about your feelings. Life doesn't care about how much effort you put in. You just have to um put yourself in a position where you're always valuable.
Yes, I like how that you brought in the issue of AI into this. It's really one of the questions I wanted to ask because we are about 4 minutes to be out of time. So, do you think that from everything you've said and what you've observed so far, do you think there's a future of software engineering now that AI is out there and seems to learn fast, seems to solve issues faster than even we humans?
Well, I think there's a future for tech, right? We do not know whether it will still be software engineering that it will be, that humans will be involved in, but there will always be tech in our lives for the next 100 years.
This something is starting your career in tech. So you can, okay.
There will
Or-
always be tech in our life, right?
Yeah.
And so continue to invest in gaining technical knowledge. and that is what will make you more useful. Because what we consider to be work today will no longer be complicated in the next few years, maybe 10, 15, 20 years from now. You have to learn something different. Don't be the guy who used to have a cyber cafe and now everybody has a mobile phone and nobody needs to go to cyber cafe again and now he's hungry. Continue to invest in learning something that makes you special.
Thank you so much. So I like what you said about continuing to invest. I mean, tech will always remain relevant, irrespective of whatever times you are living in. But what tech is today could be different from what tech will be in the next 20, 30 years, but it will always be
Exactly.
relevant. So when we keep ourselves up to date with information, so we get to be able to be relevant in that time. So lastly, before we round up to that, so what's like the average salary of a software engineer in Europe today?
Software engineers in Europe are not the richest. I mean, they're not doing so badly, but they're not the richest. Software
Okay.
engineers who are the richest are the ones in the Americas, right? Europe is more average. But typically in Europe, we have something that hovers around 60 to 75,000 euros. In Americas, it's moves a bit higher to maybe 120,000 euros, and UK as well. In Nigeria, is about 1,000 euros if you're lucky. If you're very lucky, something like 500 euros. Sorry, I'm talking Nigeria in per month. In Nigeria is about say 10,000 a year, something like that. 10,000 euros a year. In Europe, you are lucky maybe 60, 75,000 a year, and America is as much as 120 a year.
All right, interesting. I'm sure a lot of us have you've learned from everything that Stephen has shared with us tonight. I mean, if you want to start out, he has told us several platforms that you can actually go on the internet to get free information about software engineering and start out from there. So he has mentioned YouTube and how you can go to YouTube today and see tons of resources. You go to Free Code Camp, I also see resources there. Then you also mentioned how that getting a certificate from a platform like Coursera can actually go a long way, or EDS can go a long way in opening the door for you, especially to show that you have the skill and show that you have credence to actually deliver on what you said you can. Thank you so much, Stephen. We've come to the end of today's session. Thank you so much to everyone on the call today. So this session will be made available for us on YouTube, and the information will be shared. As many of us who miss any part of the session and want to replay and rehear what everything has been said, we'll definitely be getting the video. I appreciate everyone for joining. It's good to have you around. Stephen, any parting words?
I'll just say thank you for this opportunity.